And welcome to episode number 11. Yes, we have made it that far on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. I am your host, Vito, Chirco alongside, now my usual sidekick and partner in crime, the Doc from Doc and Jock, John Macroom. John Macroom, what's going on today?
Good morning, Vito. Man, it's good to talk baseball. It's good to look at something different than what we've experienced the last couple of days in Detroit sports. So I'm looking forward to hearing what you got regarding the Tigers' end of the season, the upcoming Major League Baseball playoffs, your two guests for the show. I'm looking forward to this podcast.
Yeah, a few good ones, too, coming up today who are going to join us for a segment. It is Dan Ewald, longtime Tigers Public Relations Director, first and foremost on the podcast. Then later on in today's edition of the podcast, we have Kyle O'Connor, the first ever to join us for 2 episodes of the podcast. So he will be on to discuss the Cubbies. Can they take out the Pirates in Pittsburgh? That game takes place on Wednesday, so after the podcast comes out. Now, the one before that on Tuesday night, so the day of this recording, is the Yankees and Astros in the American League for the one-game wildcard playoff, with Tanaka on the mound for the Yanks, and then Dallas Keuchel, the Cy Young favorite in the American League, on the mound for the Houston Astros, who have achieved a lot of success pretty much out of nowhere and a little bit earlier than people thought, winning 86 games, I believe, and making the wildcard game as the second wildcard in the American League. And they could have clinched home field, did not, so they play in the Bronx now, in that short right field porch. Keuchel hasn't been as good on the road. The Astros haven't either. So it's a big disadvantage for the Stros opening up this year's playoffs in New York instead of at home in Houston, where they could have been if they would have beaten the Arizona Diamondbacks on Sunday, the last day of the regular season for every team in Major League Baseball in 2015. So exciting matchups, good teams on the rise, some teams on the upswing, such as the Stros, such as the Cubs, even the Pirates a little bit to the degree that they succeeded this year, and the Yankees as well. A lot of surprise ball clubs in the wild card round of this year's playoffs. Really, the Pirates to the least degree because they've achieved the success in the past and have been in the wild card playoff game the last 2 years prior to 2015. So 4 good up-and-coming teams. Yankees not as much with the youth because they're a veteran-laden core, and they're missing one of their guys, though, going into this year's playoffs, in CC Sabathia, who we wanted to discuss today, too, going into alcohol rehab, which you know what that means. It's serious if he's doing it at this point in the ball season.
Yeah, when you look at it as a psychologist, you know that potentially then this season he was playing baseball with a super high salary, the amount of money that he's making this year. And there were probably games when he maybe showed up under the influence, or maybe he showed up with the lagging effects of maybe drinking too much. To go to rehab means that his drinking got to the point where he couldn't control it. You know, you saw the fact that, CC had an up and down year, but he was starting to kind of round into form. The Yankees made the wild card, and this is just devastating. You can't really lash out at a guy, but what you can say is the potential impact on the Yankees could be devastating. And I'm just super shocked that the news came out at this point in time that he's going to enter rehab and not only miss the wild card in the first round. If the Yankees advance, he's not going to be there. That's a huge blow. It's really unfortunate, and we all just wish him the best. And it's just right now for the Yankees. And if you're a fan of the Yankees, this is just the worst possible timing for something like this, for this news to come out.
Not to make it less serious than it really is, because it is a serious matter when you're entering alcohol rehab, no matter the part of the season. It's about handling his life matters now, and the serious life matter of him being an alcoholic and getting better. So he will now enter it and miss the entire playoffs. That's how serious you know it is. But for the Yankees, from their perspective, they want CC to get better. Now, with that, and maybe that will enhance what he does on the mound going forward as a veteran guy who's lost some velocity, isn't that dominant ace-caliber arm anymore for the Yankees at the front of the rotation. Now a back-end arm at the most. So for me, the Yankees aren't losing too much, so at the same time with the performance on the field. And that aspect, they're not losing a ton because he hasn't been good this year. But he did have a few good starts towards the end, and now it's about him getting better for next year and getting better in life as well with this alcohol problem that he has.
Yeah, just real quickly before you preview it or we talk about it later, Tanaka or Keuchel, who has the advantage in the wildcard pitching matchup? I know Keuchel has a great record. He really emerged this year and was, obviously when we watched him pitch against the Tigers, had some success. Who do you think has the advantage in terms of Tanaka versus Keuchel in the wildcard game?
I think Tanaka, because he's in New York, he knows that home ballpark of Yankee Stadium, the right field porch. It's a sandbox, out there, where you can hit it with ease, hit for power, hit home runs, and that's directly to right field, that short right field porch at Yankee Stadium. So Tanaka knows how to kind of game plan for that, and I think pitch according to that dimension out there in right field. Keuchel, youngster, third year in the league, I believe, a Cy Young favorite, will win the Cy Young, but has not been as nearly dominant on the road. And at Yankee Stadium, a home run hitting ballpark, a hitters-friendly ballpark. I don't see him succeeding to a high level tonight enough to get it done for the Stros on the road in New York. So I think Tanaka, based on the fact that he's pitching at home in his home ballpark, has that advantage over Keuchel, who has struggled on the road, at least to a certain degree, and to more than he has at home in Houston this year.
And then you give Pittsburgh the advantage at home. You like the home teams?
I like Pitt over the Cubs. The Cubs are young, but they're on the rise. They're feeling no pain, right? There's no really expectations, no pressure on them because they're the young team up and coming. They don't have to get it done this year. They have future seasons next year, the year after that, to get it done with this young core. The Pirates have been here 3 straight years and 2 straight years at least at home in Pittsburgh for this one-game wildcard playoff game in the NL. They got to get it done and get over the hump. So all the expectations, all the pressures mounted on their shoulders, they have to get it done this year, or will they ever get it done in Pittsburgh with this good of a core and ball club as a whole? So for me, it's on the Pirates to get it done. That's why I believe the Cubs have a chance because of that. And Arrieta's going on the mound, who's had a below 1 ERA in the second half of the season for the Cubbies. So for those Northsiders to just get into the playoffs in this one-game playoff, that's all they wanted this year. And with Arrieta, you know what? There's no doubt in my mind that the Cubs can get it done and that all bets are off going on the road into Pittsburgh. And that's why I'm not going to pick the upset to happen, but I wouldn't doubt that the Cubs win tonight. I could see it happening, Doc. And how about you?
Wow, I'm getting super excited potentially at the matchups of the Cubs versus St. Louis,
right?
And then the Mets and the Dodgers. Are you kidding me? That's you can't miss that.
Must-see TV. Cubs and Cards are rivals for how long now? Even Buccos and Cards, who have really become rivals in recent memory because the Buccos have improved, and the Cards are a dominant team always, year in, year out in the NL Central, building their team the right way, as we talked about with the Tigers not doing it the right way in the Periscope before the show. So the Cards, Pirates, that's who I have in the first round in the NLDS facing off against each other. And then Mets, Dodgers, as we talked about last week too, it stayed that same way. And then in the American League, I have right now the Yanks getting over the Stros. And I didn't want to say that, but I think it's going to happen because it's in New York. If it was in Houston, I would say the Stros would have gotten it done, Doc. And how about you? Who do you got in that matchup, Yanks and Stros?
I like the Yankees. Yeah, you can't discount the fact that it's in New York. The fans are going to be outrageous. It's going to be a fun environment. I like Tanaka too. Just watching the Astros down the stretch, they played horribly on the road. If it was in Houston, I might lean towards picking the Astros. You know, you can't discount the pitching of Keuchel. I mean, you know, starting pitching is a key factor in games. If he can come out there and shut down the Yankee lineup, then it could be very interesting. But, you know, in the end, I agree with you. I like the Yankees coming out of it.
Tanaka's no slouch, too. And You know what? Keuchel, though, great starting pitcher this year, Cy Young favorite. Pressure's on him more than Tanaka as well because Tanaka's at his home ballpark. And I guess Keuchel's younger. Tanaka succeeded, you know, obviously before he became a major league starting pitcher. He was overseas and everything, doing some great stuff. So, but last year, really quick before we stop this conversation here on today's podcast, you know, last year was the dominant performances of the bullpen, really the year of the pen in the regular season, in the postseason, especially with the Giants and the Royals especially. This year might be the season of the starting pitcher. If that's the case, a good matchup here and a good matchup in both games. And that's where it might favor the Stros because they have the better starting pitcher on the mound. But to sum it up, we both have the Yankees getting it done because they're at their home ballpark in the Bronx. Stros, though, watch out for future seasons. Next year, they will not lose in a game like this to the Yankees. That's my take, Doc. And really quick, we'll take a commercial break here on today's edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And when we return, we have Dan Ewald, the longtime Tigers Public Relations Director, joining us on the podcast.
Doc here for FanaticU.com, Detroit Sports official outfitter and the official outfitter of the Detroit Sports Podcast. Go visit FanaticU.com for all gear related to Detroit sports. If you're a fan of the Pistons, Lions, Wings, and Tigers, there's no better website and no better place to go visit than FanaticU.com. And if you visit the website, use the promo code when you check out, DSP. When you check out, you'll save 15% off your entire order at FanaticU.com. Go visit the website, show support. Upcoming in 2 weeks, you have Michigan and Michigan State. Rock your gear, support your teams, and visit FanaticU.com. Use the promo code DSP. Don't pay full price. Save 15% off everything, even clearance items. FanaticU.com, promo code DSP. And now back to Chirco and Company on the Detroit Sports Podcast Network.
It is Mr. Dan Ewald, the longtime Tigers Public Relations Director, joining me now on today's 11th edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Mr. Ewald, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fine. It's a good day here in Michigan. I love the autumn, and I hope everybody appreciates it too.
The autumn season, it is underrated here in the state of Michigan. And with that, let's start off by first touching upon the fact that you acquired the position of Public Relations Director with the Tigers back in '78. Now, that's what I read after you served as a local sports writer. So tell me, how did the position come to be, and how much different was it than being a sports writer?
Well, there is a transition. I'm glad you recognize it. Some people think it's the same thing or closer than what it really is. Whereas when I covered the Tigers, I covered it for the Detroit News. And I mean, back in those days, there was only one baseball writer, one football writer, and blah, 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 so on down the line. Nowadays, they have multiple players or writers on the same subject. And I think that's a little bit easier because you're not responsible for everything that goes on in the clubhouse, on the field, and that. So when I took position of PR director, I already had established myself as a writer. Now I had to reestablish myself as being on the team side. You're supposed to remain independent when you're a writer. But it was easier for me because I was always a Tiger fan since I was a little kid.
So you served 18 years, I read, as the Tigers' public relations director, during which you developed a very tight bond with Hall of Fame manager and 1984 World Series champion Sparky Anderson, who was highly revered here in Motown during his 17 years as skipper. So what was it like getting to know Sparky over the years? And what's one lasting memory of him that you can share with my listeners and I today?
Sparky was a complete manager. When I say that, he was a masterful manager with recognizing talent, using talent on the field, and all of the technical stuff that a manager must be able to do. But he also had a great feeling for humanity. He understood people, particularly athletes, regardless of the sports. I'm convinced that Sparky could have managed any major sport, but baseball was his desire. And as far as the second part of your question, I think there's so many memories, Vito, that he gave me, and I was fortunate to be with him. But the one that really sticks out in me, and I don't know if people realize this here in Detroit, that his legacy to Detroit and the community still is alive with a charity he created called CATCH, Caring Athletes Team for Children in Henry Ford's Hospital. And being a member of the organization, I can tell you, this is a first-class organization that generates money for children, sick children at Henry Ford Hospital and Children's Hospital. And I remember our team physician, was a fellow by the name of Dr. Clarence Livingood. And the three of us, he and Sparky and I were together one day while we were putting the thing together. And Sparky said, there's no greater feeling you can get in life than to reach out your hand to a child in need. And Dr. Livingood said, George, he used to call Sparky George, George, you're going to go into the Hall of Fame. There's no question in anybody's mind. But when your career is finished, you're going to look back and say, the greatest thing I ever did was create that charity. And that's the way that Sparky operated. He was very proud of it, and it still flourishes today.
So what do you think is Sparky's lasting legacy with the Tigers?
I would say he took the Tigers after a pretty long spell without championships and prided himself in educating the players that as a major league ball player, you have to be a major leaguer off the field as well as on the field. You got to treat the fans right, you got to treat the kids right, and you got to honor the game. You got to play the game right. You got to give it all when you're on the field and express that love for it when you're off the field. He instilled that in all of his players. And I used to talk to Gibby and Tram and Lou and all that, and all of them, every one of those players on those teams that we had back in the 80s, they played the way Sparky instilled it in them, and they still say they owed everything they had to Sparky.
Let's talk about one of Sparky's great rituals now. When he would arrive to the ballpark and what he would do game to game, he had this tradition of never stepping on the white chalk line that comprised a fair foul line at a major league ballpark. What was the reason behind that quirk of his?
Well, the reason went back to the Sandlot days out in California when he was a kid, and he had a pair of baseball spikes that had holes in them, and on the bottom of the shoe, and they were old and torn up, and he didn't want to get the chalk onto his socks, so he would jump over this foul line before taking the field. That's how simple it was.
Was he a clean and neat freak then?
Oh, I'll tell you what, he believed that you should, when you put on your uniform, you better be wearing it properly because you're representing the Tigers, you're representing the city, the state, and you're representing baseball. But he wanted all the uniforms to be what the word stands for, uniform. And he always was very vigilant with keeping his office clean because he knew the clubhouse manager had enough to do with all those players. So he would keep his office quite clean, and it made a difference. That's the way he led his life.
Now, one of the controversial things that Sparky did during his time as manager of the Tigers was famously refusing to manage replacement players when they reported to spring training in '95. And many since have speculated that he was blackballed from getting another job after the '95 campaign because of it. Now, you were close to Sparky. Can we settle it once and for all and say that he was blackballed? Or was it something else that caused him not to manage another game after '95?
I don't know if I don't have the answer to it. I don't have any evidence that he was blackballed. And Sparky and I used to talk about it. But he said, it's difficult for me to say for the same reason I'm saying it. We didn't have any evidence. The feelings were raw at that time because the players took a tough stance and the owners took a tough stance. But the only manager that backed it up was Sparky. And it cost him a lot of money. He lost money for not managing that period of time, but it wasn't the money with him. It was principle. There was too much at stake, too much history that had been written already for baseball, and he didn't want that history to be compromised by some of the players who were running out there. When we were in spring training, we were holding tryouts for players who wanted to come. They showed up from 16-year-old high school kids to 50-year-old professionals in an office field, former college players, former minor league players. It was not anything against the people, but it was a circus. I mean, some of them had trouble getting the ball from the rubber on the mound to home plate, and Sparky didn't want to be part of that. He loved the game too much.
And now, reverting back to the attention that you brought when talking about some of the guys that you saw play for the Tigers in the 80s, some of the all-time greats that donned the Old English D's, such as Tram you brought up, Gibby. Even there's Whitaker that was there for all those years, forming that double-play tandem with Tram. And then Jack Morris, a great ace of the Tigers for so long. And with all those players that you saw play, Mr. Ewald, it begs the question, out of all these guys who play with the Tigers, during your time with the team, who was the easiest to get along with and to work alongside?
Well, like anything else in life, when you go to work, whether you're working at a ballpark or you're working for General Motors or you're working for Joe's Barbecue or whatever it happens to be, you have to adapt to the people you're working with, and they have to adapt to you. And with Sparky, the way he instilled it, he said, it's easier to be courteous to people and work with people than it is to be a jerk. And he always uses a phrase, he said, it doesn't cost you a dime to be nice to people. And he instilled that feeling. And I'm not saying that some guys weren't tougher to get along with than other guys, but, you got to make the effort and make sure that you don't let your part of the bargain down to be a friend to people. But, we're human beings, so we form certain relationships with guys you work with. I was lucky. I don't know if anybody had as many good guys as the Tigers did because it was molded by Sparky. Guys I really liked working with just because we hit it off with guys like Trammell. It was impossible not to like Alan Trammell. Easiest guy in the world to get along with. He knew he was very fortunate to make it in the big league, and he was confident of that throughout every day of the season. But Gibby, they say, a lot of people thought he was tough and all that stuff. But he's a tough-minded guy. But he was the kind of guy who would test you sometimes, like if he wanted to be a little ornery, and it might have been a little test to see how much you could give because he liked to take it himself. So you had to play along with that. There are other guys, though. I remember a guy by the name of Richie Hebner played for us, and he was just a funny guy to be with. Lance Parrish, one of the toughest physically that you're ever going to run into, and tough in the way he attacked his position on the field. He was a leader. As a catcher, you got to be a leader, and he was.
Now, here's a tough one for you. Out of all the players who you had a front row seat to watch during your nearly 2 decades with the club, which one most stood out to you as the best player to play for the Tigers during your time having that front row seat?
Well, it would have to go back to when I was with the newspaper, Al Kaline. I think if Al had played in a city like New York or Boston or Los Angeles, not necessarily because of the teams, but because those are big cities, rabid baseball fans, and Detroit, as rabid as it is, and I think that Detroit fans are wonderful, but New York is it's a tough city, and they get more publicity than other ball clubs do. And had Al been with the Yankees, he might have been compared to, I hate to compare because when you start comparing players, some have a little more talent than others. But he would have been closing in on Joe DiMaggio. Who knows? But he loved Detroit. He takes pride that he played for one team his whole career and represents the ball club and the city very well, I believe.
He's Mr. Tiger for a reason. And really quick, back to Sparky. Do you think with all his innate and acquired wisdom on manning a major league club that he could have fixed and turned around this year's version of the Tigers?
Well, I don't go to too many games anymore, Vito, so it's very difficult for me to say. I usually watch them on TV like other people do, so it's hard for me to. There seemed to be something wrong in the ball club, and I because I wasn't around it, I really can't give you a solid answer because obviously there were problems. Every team has problems, no question, but there was something going on there that I'm unfamiliar with.
And with that, Mr. Dan Ewald, longtime Tigers Public Relations Director, thank you very much for all your time today on the 11th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.
Thank you very much, Vito. You're a pro, and I enjoy speaking to you.
All right, thank you very much. You have a good one.
You too.
And thank you once again to Mr. Dan Ewald, the longtime Tigers Public Relations Director. He served with the ball club for 18 years, all of the years, I believe, of Sparky Anderson as well, when he was a manager in Motown. And he co-authored 3 books with Sparky, and the one that I know the most of is Sparky and Me, that Ewald authored with Anderson. So great stuff from him, and apparently Sparky wasn't blackballed. Now, they couldn't prove it, I guess. There wasn't enough evidence out there to prove it that he was after 95 when he retired from the Tigers at the age of 61, I believe. So he was early in his 60s enough to say, hey, he had another chance to manage again, but never did. And there were managerial openings after that and those following seasons up until, obviously, every single season you see a few. And he never got that opportunity to manage again. Indicates to me he might have been blackballed for what he did refusing to manage those replacement players, Doc, in 95. And that was interesting in itself, just hearing that from Dan, who knew him so well.
Yeah, and I like the fact that he said how difficult it is now for the PR staff to work with the media as compared to him. There was no 24/7 access via Twitter. There was no 24/7 cable media news like it is now. So it was very fascinating. It was good stuff. And, he called you a true pro, Vito.
He did. He was a very good guest and very complimentary to me. So I'll take any compliment that I can get, Doc. And let's move on now to some more Tigers talk, huh? Here with John Macron on the 11th episode of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And we're going to focus our attention now on, I know we keep going back to this, but let's look at pitching, but the pen now. We've looked at the starting rotation a lot. I even have some projected rotations that we can discuss here too. But the bullpen, since we always focus on the rotation. And next year's closer, Ausmus brought up, that's one of the main priorities going into 2016. With that being said, who should be the Tigers closer in 2016? Could it be Tyler Clippard or Story returning to Motown for next season to be the closer? What are your thoughts on that matter, Doc?
Yeah, I honestly believe the entire bullpen, outside of Alex Wilson, there's nobody that you can count on that you go to after if the starting pitching gives a great performance, gives you 6-7 strong innings. There's nobody outside of Alex Wilson that I would maybe even keep. Rondon was highly touted, but his implosion at the end of the year really made it challenging and really questions. You can't put him as a guy that you can count on. Yeah, he's going to have to rebuild his image, and he's going to have to be more consistent. If he wants to have that job, he'll be on this team just due to the fact that he throws 100 miles an hour. But you start off with maybe Rondon and Wilson, and then you look to maybe someone, you could maybe even throw a guy like a Boyd in the bullpen and see how he does. Maybe take one of the younger guys that's in your organization, like a Lobstein, like a Kyle Ryan, and throw them in the bullpen. Because whatever is in the bullpen right now is a total disaster. You have to kind of really basically go out there in free agency, find pitchers that can get you strong innings and get outs. And who's the closer? I'm not really sure right now, but you're gonna have to likely, and I think Brad Ausmus said it in the papers, go out and find a closer. And it's a shame. It's a shame that after all this time that we don't have a bullpen. We don't have a bullpen.
They haven't developed anybody for late innings and for middle innings. And
so I don't think it's going to be a quick fix. It's going to have to be a hodgepodge and something that's put together, and it's going to take time to see if it's effective. And if you're a guy like JV, if you're a starting pitcher on this team, you don't have confidence right now that you can, get those extra 4 to 5 wins, because the bullpen right now, as it stands, total disaster.
Pursuing a closer is necessary for the Tigers into the offseason. Looking at what they should do, okay? One of the main ones that they should pursue in terms of priorities. But for me, it's not the main priority. You got to upgrade the rotation first. And how about the corner outfield spot? Those have to come first because Wilson might be the closer, okay? You have him at least, who's a closer guy because he's done well enough this year. Try him out. He doesn't throw hard, but try him out. He's no Rondon, but try him out, Doc. Why not?
Obviously, if they're going to start throwing money, then, hey, go out and get the best guy, Aroldis Chapman from the Reds. Go out and get him.
That's the question I was going to ask you, actually, about that. Trading for Aroldis Chapman, big names will have to be dealt. Do they even have the prospects in the farm system? Probably not to attain Chapman. And do the Reds even want to deal him realistically? I think if they get a deal that's over the top, they will pull the trigger and move him to wherever they get that best offer, because he is just a closer. But he throws 100+ miles per hour every single outing that he has, and he can go back-to-back nights and do it as well and throw 102, 103, I think even higher than 103 on a given night. So he's a dominant closer out there to attain. Will the Reds actually deal him? Will the Tigers have enough to as well be able to pull off the deal for Chapman with the Reds? What are your thoughts on that, Doc?
So you're saying then Aroldis Chapman's under contract. We have to trade.
He's under contract. You have to trade for him. But John Heyman of CBS Sports recently wrote an article where he included that tidbit of news about Tigers maybe looking at Chapman to
you have to look at him. Yeah,
he's a closer, and you need a closer, right?
Man, see, of course. So nothing. We can't just add a piece because we'd have to give up maybe a McCann or
give
a
up
JD
top prospects.
And
they're going to want to be
Fulmer, or you might want to. You're gonna throw Fulmer in there. Boyd, maybe Daniel Norris.
I give Boyd, but you're not going to give Norris. You're not going to give Fulmer, and I mean, you might give a guy like Verhagen, who I was going to say is going to be in the bullpen next year. He's been really good down the stretch. Him, Blaine Hardy as a lefty specialist, and Wilson are your guarantees to be in the pen next year. That's it. So that's a little bit of the middle innings. I said they really haven't developed any middle inning arms. Well, those are some middle inning guys. But as a group, as a collective unit, not a ton in that department, and especially when you focus on the late inning arms. There's really nobody in that department besides for Wilson, who might be the closer, might not be, depending on what the Tigers pursue in this offseason coming up, and whether or not they trade for a guy like Chapman. And that would be the top target out there to go and get, as we said. You have to look at him, okay? But can you get him? What are your thoughts? Because I believe it's under 50% the odds of the Tigers attaining him this offseason.
Yeah, because just due to the fact that, we right now the up-and-coming players, they want to keep evaluating them. They're still at that phase where they can still be of use to the current team. So I don't see them making the trade for Aroldis Chapman. I do believe that they're going to have to maybe find that diamond in the rough. And that'll be maybe Avila's first big test, is to see, can he go out and find a guy that maybe is not highly touted, that hasn't been a closer, that maybe can come in, that's been a long reliever that hasn't been given that chance, and maybe they find the diamond in the rough. Or maybe Alex Wilson cements his spot, or Bruce Rondon steps up and lays off the food and actually puts forth effort, hits the gym, and gets his attitude right. Maybe he's the guy. I do believe that the organization wants Rondon to be the guy. But they're going to bring others.
That to happen for too long, right? He's been the closer in waiting, been promised that role for too long, and hasn't achieved any success, hasn't lived up to the bill. So for me, Rondon is damaged goods as the closer type going forward for the Tigers. I don't think he'll ever attain that role in 2016 or later seasons with the Tigers. I think right now he can be a middle innings guy when he comes back, but he has to get himself into shape and prove that he's even that at this point either, with bringing the energy every single outing that he makes out of the Tigers' pen. Because I think he will be a part of the pen at some point, but I don't see him necessarily being a part of the opening day bullpen because of the fact that he has dealt with all these issues now off the field and on the field, not being the greatest with the command either. So that's what I think. That's my take about Bruce Rondon and the Tigers' pen with what they have currently to work with. Now, how about getting Soria back to return as a closer? And I wanted to actually, that segues me into this next topic. Which deadline casualty is the most likely to return to Motown in 2016 via free agency? Is it Cespedes? Is it Price? Or is it the aforementioned Soria? I think it's Soria because he's going to be the cheapest to get back to come here. So if you want to sign any of these guys, Price, Cespedes, big money, too much money for the Tigers. And I don't think Price even wants to return here like we've talked about in recent memory on the podcast. Where Soria, I think, will be open to a return, and he will cost the least amount of money. So for me, I think they might go after Soria and bring him back to Motown for 2016. Doc, your take on that matter?
man, he was up and down. So in my opinion, why? Just start over. I mean, Soria was a guy, he was injured when he was brought in 2014, and we didn't see the real Soria. Then he came in, and he was up and down. He blew some saves there at the end before he was traded. And I would just say, of the three, I agree, it would be Soria. Cespedes is now a hero in New York. He's upped his value even more, so he's going to go to a big market team. So I don't believe you're going to get Cespedes. David Price, I think he had a bad taste in his mouth here. I don't think he liked it near the end, and there's something to his rift with Brad Ausmus and maybe how he was dealt and how he was used here. So I don't think David Price is coming back. So Soria is the likely option to come back of the three.
But you don't want him, you're saying, Doc,
no,
huh?
I don't want him.
But he was good at times. He's not a dominant closer, but can be that closer. Better than Wilson, maybe. Better than Verhagen. Better than Hardy. Better than Rondon, for sure.
I like him as a setup guy. I think I think he's more comfortable being the eighth inning guy. I wasn't 100% confident when he came in the ninth because, of course, all closers are up and down, but I like guys who throw high heat and can strike out guys. He's more of a contact pitcher, and so with that, there's more situations where runners are going to be on base. And with the Tigers, I don't think this fan base can handle any more
guys left on base, right? In troublesome situations.
Yeah, any more two runners on, 2 outs. It's like, come on now. Just get a guy, 1, 2, 3 inning. Rondon was getting to that point where he was mowing guys down. But like I said, he's lazy. And the organization put the stamp on him. And so with that said, Rondon's going to have to show me a lot to get that closer spot. But I think we should pass on Soria.
But I think Cespedes would return, by the way, Doc, but he's too much money. Will be paid handsomely. 150 probably in totality over 6-7 years. That's too much money for the Tigers' liking. Price, I think it's a lack of respect with him and Ausmus, not respecting Ausmus entirely. And because of that and the money that he will be paid as well this offseason, I don't see him returning. But Soria, I would pursue. That's me just saying that. And hey, it's my honest take on the situation. He's better than what they have currently at closer, possibly. Besides for maybe Wilson, but I still think Soria, he's a veteran. You trust him more than Alex Wilson. And you trust him more than Bruce Rondon. But I would rather see them get somebody else as well to be the closer for 2016 and going forward. And maybe even saving money, going down the cheap route and using Wilson as that, seeing if he's capable of getting it done, starting with opening day of 2016, Doc.
Now, just also, too, in looking at rebuilding this team, there are so many areas that they need upgrades at.
That's why that should be the main priority, the bullpen or the closer situation. When Ausmus said that, that's why I did not like that at all, Doc, because of what you just said.
Yeah, starting pitching, the bullpen. Now you also, too, have some issues with the health of your two big guys, Victor Martinez and Miguel Cabrera, who didn't play. Neither one of them played 140 games this year, well under that. And you've got to remember, Miguel Cabrera is only 32 years old, and now for the better part of 3 seasons has dealt with ankle injuries. He reported that, in the newspapers earlier this week, that he was dealing with ankle pain for the majority of the season. You concerned about that at all? I mean, it's been a couple of years now, and he hasn't been injury-free, and, he's a guy that's still kind of young, and we got to pay him a boatload of money, and he hasn't been healthy.
You know what? He's been hampered by injuries big time, and he slumped down the stretch. He still won the batting title at .330, I believe, but hey, he wasn't doing strongly down the stretch at the plate.
Only 18,
so that was a concern.
Only 18 home runs?
Under 30 home runs, under 100 RBIs for the first time, I think, since becoming a Tiger. Something of that sort. So that's a big-time stat, noteworthy one that tells you Cappy might not be the same going forward, or at least when he's dealing with these injuries, which nobody would dealing with all the injuries.
You might have to make over his body and lose some weight.
Get back into shape himself where he can play. Well, he's not going to play third base or left field, but back into playing shape for even first base, right? He needs that going forward, and V-Mart maybe needs to lose a few LBs as well and get back into playing shape. Now, he's a DH, a little bit better off in that regard, but he's older and older. He's got to really retune himself, I think, refine his craft, all his conditioning, and just watch out, be careful with what he's doing this offseason because Tigers need him as well.
Now, Vito, an argument can be made, okay, if you're going to put your resources and get the best players, would you focus on the starting pitching more or the bullpen? Because you can't get to the bullpen if your starters don't get there. And they were very disappointing this year. When you look at it, Anibal Sanchez was down. JV emerged at the end, but Daniel Norris was a nice addition, and he kind of was a little bit up and down too. But the back end, the number 4 and 5, were a big concern, and they got shelled. Boyd got shelled again.
He wasn't the boy.
He wasn't the guy just yet. He needs more seasoning. So would you focus, if you're going to focus on one of the two units, more on the bullpen or the starting pitching?
The rotation. Upgrade it big time because you need that to get to the bullpen. So Dave Dombrowski's disaster of building bullpens, over 4 or 5 years since the Tigers have been contenders, was not the real reason why the pitching struggled or why the team struggled. It was more of that rotation, getting to the bullpen. So for me, you need that strong rotation to win games on a consistent basis to build a contender. The pen, as the Tigers have done in recent memory, they can slack off with that a little bit in that department and still win ball games if you have that strong and deep 1-5 rotation or 1-4. Tigers didn't even have a 1-3 realistically. It was JV then Sanchez a little bit, JV then Norris a little bit. In the beginning of the season, it was Price and then whoever else was in the rotation because JV was on the shelf. And when he came off the DL, initially he wasn't the same JV. So Verlander has to be that JV who brings the varsity stuff on a consistent every fifth day basis in 2016. And then Sanchez has to be better. And I think Norris will even take a further step to increase his odds of being a frontline arm in 2016 and going forward. He might even be the number 2 already next year for the Tigers. So that's JV, Norris, Sanchez, and then you have to add an arm or two because Fulmer might not be ready enough to be the 5th starter next year. So that means 2 starting pitchers then have to be added. So the likes of Doug Fister, Jeff Samardzija, Johnny Cueto, who I could see coming here as well, depending on the price tag, as we noted on last week's edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Co. So for me, you need that number 2 guy. You need to add him because Sanchez and Norris might not be that in 2016 and might never be that in their careers. Sanchez at his older stage in his career, Norris at this young stage. And maybe he never realizes that full potential of being that number 2 with the upside of being a number 1. That's why you better add that number 2 arm this offseason. And for me, that's why I would bring more attention, provide more attention to the weaknesses and the woes in that rotation than the bullpen.
Man, Vito, I'm just looking at the Hale Central standings. The Tigers finished 20.5 games out.
Isn't that sad?
With a 74-87 record. And if you do the quick math, that's only 161 games. That's because the rainout versus Cleveland, they just said, you know what? These 2 teams aren't in the playoffs. Screw it. That's great, huh? They actually only had to play 161 games this year because of a rainout and
because they stink.
And they stink.
They sucked it up this year.
It didn't matter. It was a meaningless game. That's how far the Tigers sunk this year. And they even fell below expectations of 81 and 81. We looked at people cross-eyed. I know. We looked. Give all credit to Vinny. He was the only one on the network that gave him a record of 81 and 81. I had him with around 90 wins, losing in the first round. I had him losing like in the wild card round.
I thought 80-something wins, so still below what I thought as well. And at 73 and 87, or 74 and 87, could have been 74 and 88, which would have tied their mark in 08, their worst record since 2008, when they once again finished in dead last. And it was a battle of cellar dwellers this past weekend against the White Sox.
And I'm not happy with the narrative that, it was the injuries and there were a lot of things going on. And the excuses were aplenty once the season ended. Yeah, there were injuries.
They always mount, right, at the end of the season.
I was shocked that they really should have just zipped it up and said, you know what, it was a terrible year. We got to do a whole lot better. And you do now have to kind of have the debate, and we'll have it definitely over the course of the Major League offseason, in that once Brad Ausmus was given some talent, he coached them to the playoffs. But now, last season, in 2014, his first year, he had a talent-laden team with Scherzer, JV, an abundance of talent. And he took that talent to a first-round exit, though. Now, I find it more concerning that with a team maybe not as talented, maybe not as, with your highest paid players maybe a little bit out, that they had this kind of season. That is the single greatest indication that your manager can't take the guys that he has and have a strong system. That means that and I know talent wins games, and I know you could say, if everybody was healthy, you didn't get an honest look, but I truly believe this is not a 74 and 87 team. I truly believe with the talent that Brad Ausmus was given this year, if he was just a 15% better in-game manager, if they were better organized with a stronger sense of leadership, this team could have finished with 85 to 87 wins, maybe get to the wild card, maybe do a little bit better. But with how things shook out, 74 and 87, 20.5 games out, doesn't earn you another year, in my opinion.
It shouldn't. And you know what, though? Look at the rotation ERA, 4.69, worst in the American League, 28th in baseball. That's bad. And that's the rotation being depleted. That's not Ausmus putting the wrong guys out there or mishandling the rotation completely. That's more the talent on the field. And as you said, you admitted it. And we admitted it before about the rotation being so weak. It's about the talent that you put on the field to perform and get it done every day for your ball club. If you don't have that talent, if it's depleted, you're not going to win many games, especially when your rotation is so depleted as it was for the Tigers this year, leading up to the point that JV became the best starting pitcher after being so horrible. And JV was so bad when he first came off the DL. It was just Price, and Price was dealt. Then JV still wasn't totally himself. Then he became that, but then there was nobody to complement him, to support him at number 2, number 3, and the 4th and 5th spots in the rotation. So for me, it's about the talent, too, and not all on Brad Ausmus. But I think it's a big sign, a big signal that he's not the right guy when last year with that talent in the first round, they got swept. That's a bigger sign to me. If the Tigers would have advanced to the second round, to that ALCS round last year in the playoffs, it'd be a different story with Ausmus right now. I don't think as many people would have thought, and I wouldn't have thought as much either, that he should have been fired after this disappointing campaign of 2015.
Now, before we start talking about the Cubs and the Pirates and the National League playoffs with Kyle O'Connor, our next guest, a lot of people are saying, well, look at a team like the Rangers. Look at the teams that are in the playoffs this year. The Rangers had 95 losses last year. There are some new teams that have made the playoffs after not having success last year. So do you think if Al Avila, can overhaul this lineup, if they can maintain maybe the 175, maybe they don't go over that, maybe they do, maybe Mike Ilitch is like, okay, fine. If you want to go over the luxury tax, if you want to start spending money on some bigger name guys, I'm not really thrilled with the likes of, Samardzija, Scott Kazmir, some of the B level free agents. If you're going to spend money and go for it, just go for it. Spend away. But
will Ilitch do that? That's the question, right?
That's the main question in the offseason. And with that, do you think if Al Avila makes the right moves, this team can get back to the playoffs within 1 or 2 years? Or should we be a little bit more patient and maybe give them, do we say 2016's a pass?
Well, you know what? You can add a lot of bullpen arms and still afford all these arms cheaply. You can, buy these arms cheaply. So you can still maintain that payroll of $175 million in totality or under that by adding a bunch of arms. But that's just for the pen. You need the rotation arms too, and Samardzija might not be the answer. But if you add him and the likes of Soria, bring him back, bring in Thornton as a lefty specialist, a few other bullpen arms on a cheap rate, you could afford all those guys and stay under that $175 million threshold. So, and not have to pay that luxury tax. For me, that's a way of contending still next year, but you wouldn't take a huge step forward. You would be maybe more of a wild card contender if you add those necessary pieces for the pen and a lesser arm like a Samardzija for the rotation, who can be a number 3, a number 2 at the highest level on a very good day for Samardzija. So for me, that's what you could do and still save some money, conserve some money, and still be a contender in 2016 without being a true contender for the World Series.
Okay, I'm very fascinated to see now what this offseason is going to bring. And in November and December is when the wheeling and dealing takes place, right around the time of the winter meetings as well. So let's see what Al Avila, let's see if he's is a trader, is a wheeler and dealer. Let's see what he does.
Will Avila be like Dave D, huh? Who was a master of the trade? I love Dave D. He always struck and made a deal in the offseason. And with all that being said, the Tigers have a busy, interesting offseason to conduct this year in Al Avila's first full year as a GM and the executive VP of baseball operations. Now, they're hopefully going in the right direction. We know already the Cubs are going in the right direction. And our guest coming up after this break is Mr. Kyle O'Connor of 5 Wide Sports. We'll be right back here on Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.
Thank you for everybody for your support. You can follow Vito, the host of the Chirco and Company podcast, at Vito Jerome on Twitter. You can banter with us at the network Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. Thank you again for all your support. The free and easy way to support us is to go to our website, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. It's the hub of the operation here at the network. It's where you can go to download all the network shows that come out weekly. Right now, we're running 4 to 5 weekly podcasts every single week covering Detroit sports and fantasy football. So go visit DetroitSportsPodcast.com and continue to support us and allow us to continue to keep the lights on, the mics hot, getting great guests. We greatly appreciate all those who support us, and I love giving guys that love podcasting like Vito, guys like Jason Jarvie and Vinny Stubbs, guys like Adam Strozinski, love podcasting, love giving them a chance. And Detroit's top talent, you don't have to look no further than the Detroit Sports Podcast Network without FCC regulations, and the only dictator is myself. So, hey, it's all good. And those guys run roughshod over me because I'm super nice. So, what are you going to do? I got to get tougher, right, Vito?
I would say so.
You got to get tougher. You can
always get tougher, right?
I can't. I can't rule with the iron fist. I can't do it. What are you going to do? But support us, DetroitSportsPodcast.com. And now back to Vito Chirco and the Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company podcast.
With Mr. Kyle O'Connor of 5widesports.com. This is Vito Chirco, your host from Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company, and we are discussing the NL wildcard playoff game between Kyle's Cubs and the Pittsburgh Pirates, who are long overdue, in my opinion, to get it done in the wildcard playoff game, to advance past this game into the official first round of the playoffs. So with all that being said, Kyle, let's start off by touching upon Kris Bryant and his success, big-time success this year at the plate. And it's been the definition of really not just big, but huge for him at the plate with all these great numbers throughout all the months of the season, besides for July when he batted below the Mendoza line, batting 168. And then you look at his numbers this past month. He hasn't stopped, hitting .316 with a slugging percentage of .521 and an OPS above 900. His best OPS this season, beside for August, when he hit above 1,000 for his on-base plus slugging percentage in that month. So big, astronomically huge numbers for him at the plate. And now we go into the postseason where he has a big game against the Pirates coming up. What do you expect from this guy that I think you agree should be the Rookie of the Year in the National League and hands down should be the NL Rookie of the Year?
He should definitely win the NL Rookie of the Year. I mean, really everyone else that was kind of up there with him ended up fading. We talked about Jock Peterson, even the kid from Pittsburgh. Who else will be in there? Matt Duffy will be in there. I mean, all great players, but Kris Bryant's going to win. And as far as the playoff game goes, I really don't think the moment will be too big for him. When he came up, we kind of all expected the big power numbers, and we knew that'd be there. We expected the big strikeout numbers. We knew that would be there as well. But I wasn't expecting him to be as good an all-around hitter. I mean, he's really patient at the plate. He draws a ton of walks. I believe, at least as of a couple weeks ago, he led the majors in walks after falling down 0-2, which for a rookie hitter is pretty unheard of. So he's a real patient hitter. He's a real good hitter. It helps to have Rizzo and Schwarber. Usually he'll be batting in between those two or in some order. But I don't think the moment will be too big for him. And if someone's going to get a big hit on Wednesday night, which someone's going to have to, he'd definitely be a good candidate for that.
And then, Kyle, I know Rizzo's been the MVP of that lineup, really of this young ball club and startup ball club in Chicago, led by Madden. But when you look at the numbers, too, in wins, 21 home runs for Kris Bryant, 77 RBIs, a .324 batting average, a .595 slugging percentage, and a above 1,000 OPS. So really, he's gotten it done in all the wins, and then in the losses, only hitting .202. So really, he's been the big-time difference maker and the reason why they've won and lost at times, and really the majority of the time as well. They're on the north side of Chicago. What's your take on that and on him being the difference there?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's kind of with any lineup in baseball. I mean, you can work around one hitter. You're going to have a lot of trouble working around two hitters, especially when they hit consecutively in the lineup. So when he hits behind Rizzo, it's, if you want to work around Rizzo, once he's on, and even Rizzo can steal bases, you're probably going to have to give Kris Bryant something to hit because even behind him, you're going to have a pretty good hitter, usually Jorge Soler. The other way around, it's you're going to want to give him a hit because you don't want to put him on. You don't want to have someone on for Rizzo, even if he's hitting behind Schwarber. Schwarber may already be on. So it's a real problem. I mean, so when he's not hitting, it usually means that he's not hitting with runners in scoring position or at least runners on base, and that's why you'll see the higher loss numbers. When he's hitting, he usually has people on base in front of him, or he's either getting on base and he has big boppers behind him. And that's going to be something tomorrow night. I mean, it's going to be they just need to get base runners any way they can. Garrett Cole's obviously a fantastic pitcher, but the Cubs, they strike out a lot, but they also walk a lot. If they can get a few guys on base, it'll be real interesting to see what Joe Madden does with that lineup tomorrow. But there's a way he can construct it where they have pop pretty much throughout the entire lineup. So if you get guys on base, no matter where they're at, you'll put yourself in a position to score some runs.
Now, Bryant's playing in the outfield on Wednesday night against the Pirates in the one-game wild card playoff. Does that diminish what he does? Because based on his stats during the regular season and a small sample size at each outfield position, he wasn't the same guy, hitting .250 in center, .167 in left, and then .158 in right field. Now, very bad numbers and very down compared to what he's done at third base, hitting .287. Does that mean anything to you that he has to play in the outfield, and maybe that diminishes what he does at the plate against Pittsburgh on Wednesday night?
No, not at all. Those are such small sample sizes. I know he's been in the corner outfield. Right field, I can't imagine him having more than a handful of at-bats. Center field, maybe 10 to 15. I know he's been in left field a decent amount, but those sample sizes are so small that it's kind of hard to lean on those. And honestly, you never know what Joe Madden's going to do. I mean, he could say he's going to do something. We see Kris Bryant at third. We could see a double switch where he ends up moving positions 3 or 4 times throughout the night. We know Joe Madden's kind of a mad scientist. He's going to move guys around. It wouldn't surprise me at all to see Kris Bryant play 2 or 3 positions tomorrow night. I don't think where he plays in the field will really have any effect on what he does at the plate.
Okay, so Arrieta now, the ace going for the Cubs against Garrett Cole head-to-head in this wild card playoff game, has an ERA below 1 in the second half of the season. How big of a favorite is he for the Cy Young, in your opinion, when you have to also take into account there's Greinke and Kershaw in L.A.?
Yeah, I think it's a two-man race. Kershaw had a great season. He struggled a little bit, at least for him, early on. I think it'll be Greinke or Arrieta, and really there's no wrong answer. Throughout the year, Greinke's probably been more stable. Arrieta had, it sounds crazy to say, make it sound like a bad start, but Arrieta had a few where he gave up 2 or 3 runs, which for him is unheard of now. Since the All-Star break, he's been as close to unhittable as I've seen in my lifetime. He just put up the best second half in the history of baseball since 1900, I believe. He when his fastball's working upper 90s and then he comes with a slider at 92, there's really just nothing you can do about it. I would certainly like to see him win the Cy Young. I'd probably give him my vote just because of how historically good he's been and where his overall numbers ended up coinciding with that. But if Greinke wins, I won't put up that big a fuss about it. Greinke had a great year as well. I'm just glad that Jake's on our side.
And now, what do you expect out of Jake against Garrett Cole? And who will get the best of the other, you think? Arrieta or Garrett Cole Wednesday night?
Just based off what I've seen the last few months, I can't see the Pirates. I don't see how they put together a big inning. I barely see how they put together more than a run. He's been absolutely unhittable. Where he will get into trouble, sometimes he will be a little too careful working around the edges of the plate. And then he can fall behind in the count and maybe serve one up, give up a base hit. He can walk guys. His biggest issue, he's going to have to really attack the hitters that are hitting ahead of McCutchen and Marte. Because beyond them, not only is Jake Arrieta a great pitcher, he really doesn't give up home runs. And outside of McCutchen and Marte, I find it really hard to believe someone will be able to put one out of the park. So if he can attack those hitters, make sure that they're coming up with no one on, maybe he can work around them a little bit, I think we'll be fine. But, with pitchers that miss bats that much, it's really hard. Garrett Cole is a great pitcher, but he doesn't miss near as many bats. He doesn't rely on the high strikeouts, which obviously comes in really handy when you're in a jam and you can't have the ball put in play. I think the Cubs' offensive approach against Garrett Cole is going to have to be just patience, see if you can get base runners, and let some of those lefty bats, be it Kyle Schwarber or Anthony Rizzo, if Chris Coughlin plays. Miguel Montero will probably be in there. Let some of those lefty bats see if they can get a good hack on them.
So now, let me ask you this. Is there more pressure on the Pirates because it's their third straight year now playing in this wild card playoff game? Last year they didn't get it done at home. They're at home again. And the Cubs are this team on the up and coming, the upswing team, on the rise. And Pirates have to get it done. And they're at home. So with that being said, is there more pressure on the Buccos to get it done on Wednesday night than your Cubbies?
Yeah, there's definitely more pressure on the Pirates. It wasn't even close until Jake Arrieta kind of started popping off on Twitter, basically guaranteeing that they're not going to score any runs. So I think that pins a little bit of pressure back into his corner. But, the Pirates are further along in what they're doing, and as a franchise currently than the Cubs are. They had a better record. They had a better record for basically the majority of the year. They're playing at home. As you said, their recent history with the wild card game isn't great. It would just be devastating for Pittsburgh if they lost another one. To their interdivision rivals, if they lost another one, it would just be devastating. The Cubs are, I know we've talked about this before. They have a bunch of kids in their early 20s, maybe up to their mid-20s. You never want to say, oh, we'll be back, because you never know. But they have quite a while to get back here. And this year, I've said I would have been very happy with a 500 record, 81 wins. So they've far exceeded what I've expected. But now, baseball, more than any other sport, you get hot, you can win a title. So I'm all in, and I'm hoping that they can do it.
So now it comes down to this, Kyle. You're on the hot seat. Your prediction. Who do you got and why?
I'm going to say 3-1 Cubs. I just think Jake Arrieta is too good. I can't see them being able to put together more than a run. I'll even go out and say Anthony Rizzo's the hero. I don't know if he hits if he gets game-winning RBI, if he just has a big hit early in the game, but I think Anthony Rizzo's their offense is going to carry him. Jake Arrieta will carry him. And I would say don't be surprised to see Joe Madden let Arrieta throw upwards of 140 pitches if he's hanging in there. I mean, he's a high strikeout guy, which can lead to inflated pitch counts while still, keeping him off the board. His no-hitter, I believe he threw, 120. But he's going to ride Arrieta's arm and then kind of let everything else sort itself out. The Cubs bullpen has been very up and down. If Jake Arrieta has to leave, with a tie or maybe only nursing a one-run lead in the 7th, 8th inning, I will be extremely nervous. And I would say also look to be a little surprised at what Joe Maddon does with his lineup. I think he'll do a lot of tinkering.
And with all that said, Kyle O'Connor, thanks for all your insight and time on this week's edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And have a good one.
Thanks, Vito. Appreciate it.
All right, I'll talk to you. And that was indeed Mr. Kyle O'Connor of 5widesports.com, a site that I have written for in the past. And Doc, oh man, he loves his Cubbies and really thinks the world of them. And it's time for the Cubs to get it done, but also for the Buccos. And I like the strength. He brought it up. I forgot to mention it when I was comparing the two ball clubs and giving my pick for this game. He brought up the strength of the Pirates' bullpen. So if they have a good enough, substantial lead going into the 7th or 8th inning, the Buccos have the advantage big time over the Cubs. So the Cubs better score early off of Garrett Cole, because once you get to the Buccos' bullpen, you're not going to score whatsoever, or at least more than one run, in my opinion. So for me, Cubs have to score early. If they don't support Arrieta early and score at least, I'm going to say 3 runs, the Cubs will not win on Wednesday night against the Pirates. And Doc, I see you busy over there texting. You're on Twitter. You're always on Twitter, always doing stuff on there. But what is your take now on that matter regarding this game, this NL wildcard playoff game? About what I said, the Cubs having to score 3 runs, I'm saying, if they want to hold on to win the ball game against the Pirates on Wednesday night.
Well, now you realize that Doc's a busy man. I'm actually doing some business here. It's kind of nice.
You are too at the same time. Look at you working hard.
Lots of podcasts love our Twitter page at Detroit Podcast. So they message me and I let people know that, hey, I'm willing to help out your podcast. Maybe we can put commercials on their network and our network. So I'm always trying to promote the podcast. Wheeling,
that's not a bad thing.
Wheeling and dealing, styling and profiling. That's what the Doc's doing. But I can't wait. Vito, I'm excited. I love your guest that you got. Man, he loves his Cubs. And I love people that love their teams. And I'm so jealous. I'm just jealous that Joe Maddon just didn't want to. Why wouldn't you come to Detroit? I know I love Detroit, and I'm a guy that, kind of has, what do you call it, rose-colored glasses, and I love all the sports teams, and I wish that players would want and managers would want to come here. Why wouldn't the full recruitment go to Joe Maddon? I know he hasn't won a lot, but he's won a hell of a lot more than Brad Ausmus.
Well, trust me, if he was out there at this point, I think Ausmus would be gone.
Yeah, so
but it's because Ausmus made the playoffs.
They had a relationship.
I
know that's what I'm saying.
As a manager,
is that I want Detroit, all the teams, to be a destination where people fall over their mamas and knock over people and do backwards deals to come here. That's what I want for Detroit teams. And right now, the Tigers and the Pistons kind of are in that situation where it's good that we got who we got in place, but I want the best of the best. We're used to Scotty Bowman. We're used to Larry Brown.
Jim Leland.
Well, right? Jim Leland's good, but he's not in the upper echelon.
Man. For me, I love Jim Leland.
He ranks up there. He won a World Series, but not in Detroit. I want the Bill Belichick in every position. You know what I mean? I want the guy that's just the best. But with the Cubs, and to your point, I know they need to score, but I like what the Pirates are doing. So I don't even think they get out of the wild card. So I know he predicted a victory 3-1. But I like the Pirates in a 4-2 game.
I do too, and Joe Maddon saw the writing on the wall between the two ball clubs and other ball clubs when he compared the Cubs to them. The Cubs have this young core for the future to build and win in 2016 and beyond. Joe Maddon wasn't going to pass that up, so he made the right decision big time in choosing the Cubs over everybody else. When he was a free agent, he really was the big market free agent among managers. And he chose the right team, in my opinion, in choosing the north side of Chicago to manage. So that was that about Maddon. You discussed or brought up again Brad Ausmus and him being this troublesome guy, not always making the right decisions. We've talked about it ad nauseum, right, on this podcast in the past. And then he does it again, right, with Norris. 54 pitches in the first inning, leaves him out there for all that. And listen to this. Here's a note for you. He did not record an out, Norris, until Mitch Moreland, the Rangers' 6th hitter, when he grounded to third base. And by that point, Norris already had thrown 35 pitches in the first. After a break in the dugout during the top half of the second, Norris went out there to throw 17 more pitches in the bottom of the second then, before leaving the game with 2 outs. So the final count was 71 pitches thrown by him and an inning and 2/3. How ludicrous was that by Brad Ausmus?
That was the decision to end all decisions. I mean, you get the nod from the management that you're coming back, and that's what you do. It's just, I mean, it's good, Vito. I'm glad that they played 161 games, and I'm glad that they ended a game early, and I'm glad the Tigers season is done. I think I need a couple weeks to watch some good baseball. I'm going to immerse myself in these playoffs and take my attention away from some of the problems with our football team here. But I'm looking forward to the playoffs, and I'm looking forward to watching some good high-level in-game managing, some good high-level pitching, and some teams that are actually playing well, not like what we saw the last 2 months. I mean, basically, I watched 3 innings in the month of September, the entire month. I tuned out. I followed the stories, I read about them, but I couldn't watch any more baseball. They lost me this year. Right around the time of the trade, letting everybody go, you knew it was done in terms of the playoff run, but I kind of watched to see how they responded. I watched the Van Man debut. I watched to see how Boyd was doing. But right around September, the call-ups, we talked about it, bored the hell out of me. And so,
boring for a lot of fans, and even
once
for me
football
as a hardcore fan.
Once football started, the doc stopped watching the Tigers, and that's what it was.
Well, the high-level pitching management for the clubhouse by these managers, you didn't see it out of Brad Ausmus. So now you're going to see it, like you said, high-level in-game management of bullpen, pitching as a whole, and lineup, the whole entire lineup. We didn't see that out of Brad Ausmus. And high-level pitching, high-level even hitting at times. Wasn't consistent out of the Tigers all this season, and that's why they achieved the low mark this year and were way under 500 and way under the mark of what they finished with last year with 90 wins in 2014. A bad season, but hey, the story's not closed on the Tigers because of the offseason. The beautiful thing of the offseason, and a smart front office man in Avila who has a lot to prove this year, but I think he's good enough to get it done in the offseason, to make the right and necessary moves to get the team back into contention in 2016. Unlike those Detroit Lions. That's where they have no hope. They're 0-4 right now. They might go 0-5. I think they will against the Cardinals. Not to totally focus on the Lions now, but their front office, different story. They should revamp everything. Fire those guys, Mayhew, Luan. Everybody should be out, and they should clean house with the Lions. The Tigers have something to build upon, I think, with the foundation already being there with Avila. That's a good thing about the Tigers and why the story has not been closed on them. And should be never closed, okay? As long as they have a smart man like Avila leading the club from the front office. And that's my take there, Doc, about, hey, the Tigers, where they're at, where they're going, and how, you know what, there's something to achieve in 2016, I believe, from the Tigers if they make the right moves.
Now, and great podcast.
Yep.
I'm looking forward to next week. We have the author of the book, The 50 Greatest Detroit Tigers of All Time. Robert Cohen, the author, did his research, and he ranked the top 50 Detroit Tigers of all time. And we'll talk to him about his new book. Vito's going to review it this week, and Robert Cohen will join us next week on the podcast, and we'll get his chance to see how Vito thought about the rankings.
We'll see where he went wrong on the rankings, right? And we'll talk to him next Wednesday. As we drop another podcast next Wednesday, the 12th episode will be released then of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. And until then, thank you to Doc, John Macron, the man, also to Kyle O'Connor and Dan Ewald, our 2 guests on today's edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company. Enjoy the wild card action and talk to you next week for another fun-filled edition of Tigers Talk with Chirco and Company.